Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We're gathered here today on the traditional territory of the signatories of Treaty 6, and I also acknowledge the Métis Nation, which shares a deep connection with this land. My name is Lizette Tejada, and I'm the Alberta NDP critic for anti-racism, diversity, and 2S LGBTQIA issues. I'm joined here today by Vivek Shraya, a musician, writer, visual artist, and associate professor from Calgary, Christina Hamer, a teacher here in Edmonton, and by our leader, Rachel Notley. This Sunday is Transgender Day of Visibility, which should be a day for celebration. It should be a day to reflect on how far we've progressed together as a society, to celebrate our diversity, and recognize the unique experiences of trans folks and how that adds to the vibrancy of the lives of everyone. Sadly, even as we've come so far, our current UCP government seems intent on taking steps backwards. This day also brings awareness to the discrimination that members of the trans community still face every day. And I'm embarrassed to say is being perpetuated in the legislature of Alberta. That's because we have Premier Danielle Smith, who quite simply is a bully. Through all the misinformation and inequity that the members of the trans community face, particularly youth, to have the government leading this province, aggravating these lies and misinformation, is truly heartless and destructive. I'm proud to stand with the community today, along with colleagues and our leader today on Trans Day of Visibility. And now I'd like to pass things over to Rachel Notley.
Thank you so much, Lizette, and thank you to Vivek and to Christina for joining us here today and being fierce advocates for the trans community and for your students. Now, as Lizette said, even with our strides forward against discrimination, we have a long, long way to go. The proposed anti-trans policies from Danielle Smith seem intent on taking this province backwards. Disguised behind a video with soft lighting in which she claimed she cared about trans youth, Danielle Smith announced policies that would take away autonomy and rights from Albertans, take away rights from parents, take away rights from kids and young people, and make our schools feel less safe. With these policies, Danielle Smith is saying that she knows better than trans youth, than their parents, than their teachers, than their physicians, and that youth aren't smart enough to know about their own bodies. Smith presents misinformation as fact, leading Albertans to believe that surgeries and procedures are being performed on young people that simply are not. And when it comes to immunization, Smith has insisted she isn't a doctor, but she'll gladly pay a doctor when it comes to treatment of trans youth. And what's even more concerning is the clear influence Danielle Smith's friends in Take Back Alberta and far right-wing members of her base have when it comes to crafting these horrible policies. Just over a week ago, the UCP and one of their MLAs hosted an event with Tory Tanner, serving as the keynote speaker, who, need I remind you, was the extreme candidate that Danielle Smith fired before the election. This woman made outrageous claims that teachers across Alberta are showing pornography to children. Of course, this is categorically untrue. But since then, neither the minister nor the premier have had the courage to come right out and say that. In fact, they sat back as their own caucus member elevated and promoted these views and the person spreading them. On top of that, at the event itself, Tory Tanner claimed credit for the intolerant, bigoted policies the Premier herself is now pushing. She told the audience the education minister is listening to what she has to say. That should really concern all Albertans. To be clear, what's happening is the most extreme members of the UCP are now sharing conspiracy theories and hateful misinformation directly with the leadership of this province. That's going unchallenged by this cabinet, while these extreme members proudly and publicly take credit for wielding influence within the UCP government. That is what's behind some of the most hateful, discriminatory policies that we have seen in this province in the last 20 years. So, as we approach this very important Trans Day of Visibility, our party, the NDP, believes that not only should we support the rights of the trans community, that we stand by them as they face incessant bullying by this UCP government. And in fact, we should celebrate the trans community and raise all of them up. The Alberta I know is tolerant, not bigoted. The Alberta I know embraces diversity, and we're not bullies. The Albertans I know are led by love, not hate. So as Sunday approaches, I want to say directly to the members of the trans community once again, I see you, I celebrate you, I love you. And now, I'd like to pass things over to Christina.
Thank you, Rachel, for having me here today. When I heard about the policies being introduced by Danielle Smith, specifically targeting students and trans youth, I was incredibly worried. Schools are meant to be a space where all kids should feel welcome, safe, and happy. Teachers and parents want kids to succeed in the classroom, and we are part of a team to help each child who attends a school in Alberta get a good education and an opportunity to learn about who they want to be. But these policies being put forward by the government are causing divisiveness between that team of teacher and parent, and it's causing mistrust. The divide that the UCP are creating will only result in decreased outcomes for kids in schools. Danielle Smith's policies are targeting an already vulnerable group of students. And not only will this cause trans and gender diverse students to feel less safe and to be themselves at school, this will harm the level of education that all students will be able to receive. The amount of barriers and red tape that the UCP are putting in place for students to be opted into sexual health education and even the approval of education materials will mean that many students will simply not receive comprehensive sex health education as per the Alberta curriculum. I worry that these barriers for my students, and I worry about their support team of teacher, parent, and community being ripped apart by the divisiveness and unnecessary policy put in by the UCP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. And now I'd like to introduce my friend Vivek Shraya, an acclaimed author, Canadian Screen Award winner, broadcaster, creator, writer, and star of a new TV series, and most recently, creative writing professor at the University of Calgary. Vivek also volunteers her time on the Tegan and Sarah Foundation. I'd like to invite her to share her own story and to tell us what this UCP legislation really means.
Thank you, Rachel, for this opportunity, and thank you so much for all you've done to support and celebrate the 2S LGBTQ+ community in Alberta, especially in a time when it's not popular. Every Pride, I always look forward to the latest viral video of you dancing better than all of us at the parade. How dare you? So I grew up right here in Edmonton. My mom actually worked for the provincial government, right in that building right over there. My dad and my brother and I would pick her up from the building across the street right after we'd stop for soft ice cream at the convenience store, of course. When I reflect on my childhood in this province, I miss those carefree days. Because as soon as I became a teenager, I experienced a significant shift from feeling free to feeling constant surveillance. And by surveillance, I mean daily reminders that I was different, that there was something wrong with me, because I wasn't acting the way a typical boy should be acting. And everybody thought they knew me and what was best for me better than I did. But I actually didn't think there was anything wrong with me, at least at first. I loved being different. I loved wearing bright colors and singing and dancing. Being like everyone else seemed boring and normal. I knew who I was then, and I liked that kid, until I was told over and over again not to, that I had to change, that I had to be someone else. When you repeat a message to a child, when you repeatedly project confusion onto a confident child, eventually they listen. They learn to hate themselves. They learn to banish what makes them special and beautiful. Or sadly, they leave this city, this province, just like I did, just like so many queer people have done, looking for safety elsewhere. In my case, it took me a very long time to realize that I was right all along, that who I was as a kid is pretty close to who I want to be. So I've had to spend most of my adulthood doing a lot of work and healing to reclaim myself, all of myself. Some of that work and healing has come from being an artist. But healing can come in unexpected ways, and surprisingly, one of my greatest forms of healing was returning to Alberta in my late 30s to be a teacher. I remember being so nervous on the first day of class, being back at the site of my trauma, the classroom, convinced that my students would walk out, seeing a trans teacher at the front of the room. Instead, I've been so moved by the respect my students have shown me, all of them calling me Miss Shraya and using my correct pronouns. I'm not an optimist by nature, because optimism is a privilege, but these moments at the university have given me hope. Witnessing the various tireless efforts to make this province safer for queer and trans citizens by organizers and activists behind Alberta organizations like Exposure Festival, Shades of Color, the Centre for Sexuality, Skipping Stone, and Glass Bookshop have given me hope. Your leadership, Rachel, has given me hope. The hope that queer and trans kids in this province wouldn't feel like they needed to leave just to be who they are. But lately, this hope is starting to falter. It's been devastating to see so much of the amazing progress that has taken place here in this province in the last few decades be threatened and dismantled, particularly by the laws the UCP says they'll bring forward. Forcing teachers to out students to their parents is absolutely not an act of care. This actually forces 2S LGBTQI+ students who have the right to explore and figure out who they are in school, just like their peers, to potentially hide who they are and suffer in silence. Refusing treatment and healthcare to kids pushes them to other extremes. 2S LGBTQI+ youth make up between 25% and 40% of unhoused youth in Canada. These numbers are tied to youth experiences of relentless homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, and in some cases, from their own parents. I was so fortunate to grow up in a home with supportive parents. And even though we had many cultural and language barriers, my parents never said to me, "This is for men and this is for women." In their own ways, my parents have always loved me for who I am. 2S LGBTQI+ kids and youth are some of the most vulnerable in our community. For Trans Day of Visibility, that is right around the corner, my biggest wish is that queer and trans kids and youth can have the kind of love and nurturance that my parents gave me, that we can see a greater visibility and efforts from allies to fight for us, and that these UCP laws are stopped. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Vivek. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and we're happy to take any questions that folks might have.
All right, thank you, Rachel. We'll now go to questions. Just a reminder for those joining us on the phone to use the *9 function, and for those using Zoom to use the raise hand function to get into the question queue. And with no questions on the line, we'll wrap today. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.